Facilitating and leading teams. Lesson 6, Team Effectiveness Basics. The myths and realities of team effectiveness. One of the team usage myths that was presented earlier simply states most teams in this country are effective. If we're honest with ourselves, we'll realize that in actuality, the converse is true. Most teams in this country are much less effective than they could be. We've just grown to accept the team performance norms that are currently in place. Actually, the situation is much grayer than either of the above two generalizations would lead you to believe. Some teams are effective some of the time. Effectiveness itself can only be measured against the standards that you set and those that you've been exposed to during your own work experiences. If you set standards that are not that challenging, then you might feel that your teams are effective. If you measure them against their potential or against other best-in-class teams that are out there, however, you'd have to admit that most, if not all, of them could accomplish a lot more. The time crunch created by massive change and downsizing makes the need for team effectiveness that much greater. Every team, be it made up of managers, hourly employees, or both, needs to get the most out of every minute they spend together. This is also one of the key reasons why I chose to adopt the operational definitions for teams that I use in this workbook. Across the country, we waste too much time in ineffective meetings each day. This unfortunate reality applies to all three team types as well, not just to project teams. How many of the teams in your company have effectiveness measures? How many of these teams can prove that they're improving their effectiveness over time? Organizations are only as effective as their teams and individuals are. If a group of managers meets weekly, they invest people hours to accomplish something, whether they call themselves a team or not. Every wasted people hour spent in a team environment could perhaps be better spent working alone on an improvement. The fundamental question is, what should a group of people produce as a result of their spending time together? The 8 myths of team effectiveness. Number 1, we know how many teams we have in action. In reality, most organizations have more teams in action than they realize. In turn, limited team leadership resources are spread too thin, and a lot of team redundancy exists as multiple meetings are used to talk about and maybe work on the same issues. Myth 2. Our teams do almost all their work in meetings. The reality is that a majority of a team's work is actually done in between each meeting. Because this myth is not understood, however, the average cycle time of a team-based project is much longer than it should be. Myth 3. Teams are the best way to get a lot of projects completed. From a pure people hours invested perspective, individuals can complete more projects than teams. Using an individuals-only approach, however, will compromise project ownership, thoroughness, and creativity levels. So there has to be a blend. Myth 4. We train all our teams up front before we put them to work. Team skills cannot be learned via a one-time awareness generation training session. Learning team skills requires repeated practice. Provide some awareness training up front, but provide skills as you go when they come up and when they're needed. Myth number 5, we form teams to solve most of our problems. Sounds simple, doesn't it? Have a problem, form a team. The reality is that all organizations have limitations relative to 1, people with team leadership skills, and 2, people with time built into their jobs for team-based work. And those are significant limitations. You don't actually have that many people who have well-developed team leadership competencies, and very few people have time built into their jobs for team-based work. They're there to support the value stream. They're there to be the value stream. Myth number 6, we know how effective all of our teams are. Unfortunately, very few teams even have one effectiveness measure that they trend over time, let alone a balanced performance scorecard. Myth 7, our teams select projects that benefit the organization the most. This approach will work if all team members are fully aware of an organization's goals, costs, and resource limitations. And by the way, that is possible. I have worked in places where everyone in the facility was aware in general of the organization's goals, costs, and resource limitations, and it makes a huge difference in terms of people understanding why decisions are made as they are. Normally, however, this is not the case. And then finally, myth number 8, our team leaders are determined by the positions they hold. If you adhere to this norm, you'll find that a lot of your teams will struggle. Very few formal leaders have been trained to effectively lead teams as part of their formal or work-based education. They lack the group dynamics understanding. They lack the people skills. It's not saying they can't develop them. They just haven't been exposed to them yet. What determines team effectiveness? What drives team output? How do you measure team effectiveness? How do your teams measure their effectiveness? Continued learning and experience has helped me realize that team effectiveness should actually be measured along two continuums: cohesion and performance, or people and process, if you want to make it more basic. These two factors are mutually exclusive in the sense that a team can be highly cohesive. They can get along great, but they can be very weak from a measurable performance perspective. They don't do anything. Conversely, the team could be great at completing a lot of projects or otherwise improving the organization, but the team members don't get along at all. They fail to relate well from an interpersonal standpoint. You need strength in both areas for long-term team effectiveness. Teams cannot be fully effective unless 4 key types of team investments are made. First of all, alignment. How do your teams know they're working on the right things and making the best decisions? Number 2, resources. What types of support do you give your teams in terms of training, normal job release time, capital and expense funding, and leadership? Investment number 3, information. How easy is it for your teams to get the information they need to quickly progress through the problem-solving, project development, or error prevention processes of their efforts? And then finally, investment 4, recognition. How do you formally and informally recognize work, project, and process-focused team success? Project teams and process work teams that are properly supported in all 4 investment areas will provide significant measurable results. Properly supported is the key word there. If these investments are made effectively, some degree of short-term results will be realized as well. There's generally a delay, however, between when the investment is made and when the investment's payback can be seen. That's why it's called an investment.